8-week tour. Yeah,
Yeah.
instead of going out for like 8 weeks, we break it up into 2-week chunks and spread it out across the season. So it works out great for home life. Home life doesn't get squirrely, and we kind of stay energized, and it ends up appearing like we're on tour all the time, which we kind of are, but we take breaks.
And I feel like that whole dynamic of, your, I mean, in 2021, when you released your latest record, that was kind of your beginning in fatherhood. So you've had a couple years of
Mhm.
being a dad, and how has
Yeah.
being a dad affected tour life now?
Um, when we first started playing again and Jesse was a dad, um, he would get on tour and he would just like get in his bunk and sleep. And he was like, "Man, this is great," like,
Hmm.
"Wow, this is great." And I always thought like, "Oh man," I was always kind of uncomfortable out there, and then now I know what he's now I know what he's on about. you know,
He's got all the
You-
early bedtimes now.
yeah. Um, it's good. My she's almost 5 now, so um it's a little bit different. You can call and you can talk. It's not like before where it's almost like, having a pet where you can't really talk. You can, your partner can show them, your wife
Yeah,
can show you the dog on the phone, but you can't really communicate. Um, but now, we can chat and I can see how her day was and everything. So
that's
yeah,
good.
it's good. Yeah.
And what does your daughter think of your music? Have you introduced her to DFA?
Um, Not specifically. She's been to some sound checks and things, and it's quite a loud
Yeah.
situation, just in a sort of um just in a factual sense or whatever. Like, she enters the room and it's very, even though she's wearing hearing protection, the sound pressure is so powerful that it's kind of it's kind of upsetting in a way, or it's so she's into it. She likes that I play, I play around the house, and she likes playing as well. I don't, and she's got a pretty good sense of what I do. She knows that I go play shows. She knows who Jesse is. She knows, when she sees the logo, she's like, "That's you. That's Jesse." It's like, yep, she gets it. Yeah,
You know,
she's her own. She's just like a person, right? So it's like a
yeah.
very powerful little person. So I don't try to push anything on her specifically, or like I'm not trying to impress her. Be like, "Don't you think your dad is cool?" Like, she's got her own stuff going on.
Yeah, man. And you brought up the logo. I just want to touch on that briefly because it's crazy that your logo is just it's timeless, You guys had that hiatus from
Mhm.
2006 to about 2011 of not playing,
Mhm.
but that logo was everywhere, right? I remember seeing that logo and specifically hearing you guys in video games when I was a kid. That when I
Mhm.
was younger, we didn't have easy accessibility to the internet. So word of mouth for me was like when I picked up NHL 2004 and I heard Franz Ferdinand Take Me Out. I'm like, holy crap, this is an awesome
Yeah, yeah,
song. And it's the same
yeah.
thing with Death from Above. You're
Mhm.
featured on like SSX on Tour, which is a great little snowboarding game. Tony Hawk's American Wasteland and an
Mhm.
abundance of like NBA, FIFA, stuff like that. So would you
Mhm.
say that's kind of like a way that people kind of kept you in mind when you guys were on that hiatus?
Yeah, I mean, it was well, first of all, with the logo, that was on purpose. It was one of Jesse's strokes of genius in the early days of, he'd been playing in bands and punk bands and creating imagery for that for a while already. And you'd go to a mall and you'd see a Ramones t-shirt, and you go, "Oh, that's the Ramones." You'd see people who had no business wearing a Nirvana t-shirt wearing a Nirvana t-shirt. Um, you'd see uh, Misfits shirts around, and there were these images that were, um, they just told the whole story right away. Even the Ramones logo says the Ramones on it, but you know what that thing looks like without it. Black Flag, these bands that are just these iconic things. And my idea for the record cover was to put our faces on it because that was not cool at the time and it seemed unusual. Bands were more anonymous, and you'd put some kind of weird art on the cover or something, and I was like, no, let's be like a boy band, let's put our faces on the record. And Jesse's like, that's cool, but let's also do this thing. And so it was also, I don't know if you know the record In Rock by Deep Purple, but it's the members of Deep Purple as Mount Rushmore. So it's kind of an interpretive. We kind of wanted to do that kind of thing, like a iconic cover that could translate in the future. And when he came up with this black and white minimalist thing, it instantly was like, yep, that's the thing. And we wanted something we could put on a poster without having to write the name out. We wanted something where you could put the thing on and then just write the date and the location and people would show up. And we still have fun playing with that.
Yeah.
As far as the video game stuff, yeah, I mean, I was during the hiatus, to be honest, I was trying to forget about the whole thing. Like I was not interested in it. And the fact that it continued to exist, was a testament to it and gave it value to me after. Not that I was like, I needed validation, but after being away from it for so long, I realized how special it was. And I remember, a couple of years into the hiatus thinking like kind of examining my life and my goals and what I wanted to do. And it was still music, and it was still, I still wanted to communicate with people. And, it's hard to start something new. And I was starting new things and just exploring artistically. And I was thinking like, I wish that I had a way to communicate with more people, not in a way like I want to be huge, I want to be big. I like that exchange. And then I kind of, looked at my wallet and found a coupon for like, oh, a hot shit rock band. I have a coupon for this, And that's when Jesse and I started talking. And I think I think people still are excited about this band. And we weren't sure if they were, because even today, the concept of an audience is very abstract to me unless we're in front of them. Um, like every show, even if we see the ticket sales and it looks like it's going to be a good show, I don't really expect anyone to be there, until we hit the stage or we peek out before we go on. I'm like, wow, there's people showed up, and that's cool. And that's how we relate to the audience in a visceral, direct way. So when we were away, the idea of an audience being out there was so abstract. Even when we're not touring, I'm like, what? Like, who's into our band? And you only discover that when you're in front of them. Like streaming numbers or whatever, or followers, it doesn't really mean anything to us. So yeah, it was surprising and rewarding, and it was kind of shocking because we're a weird band.
Weird's good though.
Yeah, I know, I absolutely. But the fact that like when we were starting to play again, I thought, do they really want this? Like, do people really want to see this band? We started rehearsing. I was like, wait a second, this band is crazy. Does anyone want this?
You brought up that during your hiatus at the beginning, you didn't really want, to really think about the band, which is understandable. When you take a break from something, obviously you're taking a break from it.
Mhm.
I want to know, because you released You're a Woman, I'm a Machine, and then it was about a year or two later, you guys went your separate ways for a bit. So
Mhm.
now you're celebrating 20 years of this
Mhm.
album, and you get to see, the 20 years of people enjoying this specific record over and
Mhm.
over and over.
Mhm.
Do you
Mhm.
have like a better sense of appreciation for the music that you made back in like 2004, 2005, now that, you've grown professionally and personally?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's part of me that listens to that record critically and goes like, why did we do it that way? But there's also a stronger part of me that looks at it with the same reverence that it's looked at by a fan or by someone. I see it as a classic cult record. I see it as something that's impenetrable, like untouchable. Um, there's a reason why I connected with people, and I have some understanding of why that is, but I'm not full understanding. I'm, it's, we made it. So my memories are, they're tangible. And so I remember the hardships. I remember how I felt, but I also look back, I've still got the lyric book that I wrote all those lyrics in. And to see the evolution of where some of those ideas started and how they ended up, I think it's a miracle that we ended up making a record like that and that it ended up being so cool and timeless because, those songs, some of them, the song Turn It Out, the lyrics were taken from a blues song I wrote when I was 18 or 19 years old, like some of those lyrics, right? So it's like, it's post high school, post teenager, and um my ideas were so unrefined. I didn't know what was good. I didn't know what I liked really. I was just kind of experimenting. And the fact that we ended up where we ended up in that short amount of time, really, because the time scale now, it's like you look back, it's 20 years. But at the time, where were we? We were in Spain in the summer playing, and Air were celebrating the 25th anniversary of Moon Safari, and we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of Your Woman, I'm Machine. And when I look back at that, I think I can't believe it was only 5 years from Moon Safari, which I was a fan of that record, and 5 years later, I was already putting out this like cult classic punk record. It's such a strange thing to consider. Yeah, now I'm just going off on a tangent, but
No, I appreciate it, man. When I was preparing for this interview, I listened to a lot of different, takes that you had. Most recently, like your interview with Anthony Fantano. You guys are just like incredible to listen to about music. I could just pick your brain about it all day. Um,
okay.
you know, you talk about You're a Woman, I'm a Machine and how it was super unrefined at times, but it also included a lot of like personal hardships because I mean, Romantic
Mhm.
Rights came essentially from you guys being stranded on the side of a highway, right? You guys were
Mhm.
coming back from that trip from LA to Vancouver, stranded somewhere, not the best trip, and you're like, man, what are we even doing? And then
Mhm.
how did you come back after that mindset where it's like, I don't even really want to do this, and then you make Romantic Rights?
It's funny, the so that trip to LA, we put out our EP through 8 Records in Vancouver. We put out Heads Up with them. And because there were only two of us, it was very easy to travel early on. Like we were literally flying on Jesse's mom's airplane points, like for free. Um, because there's two of us, if it was a 4-person band or a 5-person band, it would have been hard and complicated. It was quite easy. And our label was in Vancouver. So this woman at Capitol Records named Laurel Stern showed interest in us very early, and we thought, okay, we're getting signed to Capitol Records. That's it. And we were invited to play this show in LA, the show that you're referring to. These two shows, one at the Glass House in Pomona, and one at the Troubadour in LA. And we played the Pomona show, and the next night, we're meeting this woman, Laurel Stearns from Capitol Records, and playing at the Troubadour, this classic venue. And we came back from Pomona, and we partied with at this woman's apartment with all the bands, Blood Brothers and Pretty Girls Make Graves, Red Light Stain, and got completely annihilated. Caused a lot of trouble in this woman's apartment, and then the next day went to play this show at the Troubadour, and it went for us. I felt it went terribly. The drums were all out of. It was like a friend's drum kit who we found in the back of a bar. And it was like very bad. I couldn't sing. I was up all night screaming and making Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonations. Um, and we felt so low. And then when we met this, really talked to this woman, she was like, yeah, well, I think you guys are great. And, once you sell 50,000 units, then we can start talking about what's next. We're thinking like 50,000 units. We only pressed 1,000 records. There's only 500 seat or whatever it was. It was so intangible, so impossible, so insurmountable. and we were so depleted by that. And then, something like Romantic Rights comes along and kind of out of the air and reinvigorated the band. And I would say, without that, there would be none of this, because it came from a different angle. Like the song, until that point, there were taboos in my playing from high school and on. I wouldn't play the blues, and I wouldn't play disco music. Not like I didn't like disco sucks. Like it was way after that, but it was just those templates seemed cheesy to me. Um, and then when I broke that taboo with Romantic Rights, it unlocked something. It's like, how there's always something stinky in perfume, like, and there's a fine line between repulsion and attraction. Sometimes you're kind of grossed out, but you're kind of attracted to it. It's like it was that feeling with this thing, which made it special. And it really invigorated that whole chapter of the band, and it unlocked the ability to take more chances, and to be more confident, I suppose. But so this woman, Laurel Stearns, who kind of in a way was a villain in this early time, because there was this kind of like this promise, and then it was taken away and the reality struck. But it motivated us in this way. And she works with, she's still in the industry. She works with this band Teen Mortgage that are touring with us right now. So she came to the Minneapolis show and we saw her. Jesse was the first time since probably that night that we saw her. I'd seen her a couple of times since, but it was really interesting to see her, nice to see her. And it's good timing because we're celebrating this era, and in a way, she had a part in being a catalyst for that era. So it's almost mystical that she just shows up.
Life has a weird way of coming full circle at times.
Yep.
Very weird way. I want to go back because you talk about how, you're a woman, I'm a machine was super kind of, it was raw, ideas bouncing all over the place. And I don't want to compare you guys to a group, but I do want to follow a similar path that maybe DFA took. One of my favorite groups of all time, artistically, they've inspired me a lot, is Alexis on Fire. Alexis on Fire's first record, their self-titled record, was super raw. They made it in Wade McNeil's mom's basement. It was all written on their math notes and stuff. And they've advanced to a point where if you listen to their latest record, it's what they want their sound to be like. So when you get to your point where you're releasing music back in 2021 and you made it kind of a point of emphasis saying this is, I've advanced and matured musically. Are you worried that fans aren't going to follow you? Because a lot of people didn't really follow Alexis on Fire to their latest record, but obviously, that's a small group of people. But there's still probably a group of people that sit there and it's like, why are they playing songs that are off, not on You're a Woman, I'm a Machine, right? Like some people are still probably just fascinated with that record you released in 2004, like many are with,
Mhm.
Alexis on Fire self-titled, to the point where they did a St. Catharines show and they literally just played every song on their first record to
Right.
these fans.
Mhm. Um, yeah, I don't think about it so much. We really sort of, our external ambitions they're basically non-existent anymore. Like there were eras in the band when we first came back and did the Physical World. Um, the stakes were high. Not that there was a great deal of pressure or anything. There was, but that's not really what was concerning. There was just like there was a gravity to the band and a gravity to making that record. And we the label invested a lot of money into us making that record, and we hired a hot rock producer, guy that made huge records, and similarly on Outrageous Now. And so there was kind of an external pressure through the labels, and also an ambition that we had. where we thought, okay, we can make an impression on rock music, not just whatever niche we are, whatever esoteric thing we are. And I have no regrets of those records, the way we made them, or the songs, or our approach, or even our delusions at the time, because it was an incredible experience and very rewarding. But I don't think either one of us feels that way anymore. We really just want to make cool sounding music by ourselves that we find interesting. And we certainly don't want to alienate our audiences, but I don't think we have. When we play on this tour, when we play Your Woman, I'm a Machine, it's almost perfect. That record ends with Sexy Results, it's a very contentious song in our band because it was literally an add-on, like a contractual obligation. The record's supposed to end with Pull Out. It's supposed to end with like the most aggressive punk song on the record. And our record was too short. So the label said, you have to make something else. And we went in the studio and we're just like, let's just make a silly disco track or a dance track. And I, wrote lyrics based on a Simpsons reference, and wrote lyrics about being a guy working in offices as like a copy guy, a temp guy that thinking he was maybe young and good looking enough to seduce the boss, like it's a silly story. But we end with that song, and it's, and it goes off and people like it, but it's like, and it's the end of the record, and we finish and we have a little chat with the audience, and then we play Nomad, which is the first song on Outrageous Now, and it couldn't be more different. Just technically, conceptually, lyrically, it's a very heavy song. Musically, it's a very heavy song. Vocally, it's a very heavy song. And so the contrast couldn't be more stark. And that song goes off, and it leads us into the second part of the show, which is the, selections from the catalog. And the excitement doesn't wane. It amps up, and then it amps up all the way to the end of the show. So, and we have people that, we talk to after the shows or chat with, like slide into our DMs, and, they want to hear the new stuff too. So I'm not really worried about that. I understand, what you're saying. I don't know how at risk we are of getting into the ballad game. And yeah, Alexis on Fire are a complicated band because they have, Dallas has a very successful career as a smooth guy, so yeah.
I think overall, people in general, not even just with music, but as human beings, sometimes can be afraid of change, right? They love something so much where it's like, oh, someone releases something new. This doesn't sound like what I'm used to hearing. Sometimes it takes a second for them to kind of understand the vision musically and artistically. And,
Sure, yeah.
you guys have sold out a bunch of shows on your tour so far. So obviously they're riding with you regardless. I don't know if it was you or Jesse that said that your music is, quote, small room music, because you recorded your first record in a very tight space, right? So the sound didn't really leave. But now you guys are able to play, some bigger outdoor shows. What are some of the struggles that you guys have to kind of do on the fly on a live show, compared to, a dingy bar, very tight space, compared to like when you guys came back to Coachella and it was like that wide open stage?
Oh God, let's not bring that up. It's so traumatic for me.
What was traumatic about it?
Oh, it was just, I don't want to we didn't have monitor guy. Like we weren't prepared. We didn't have an engineer on stage with us. We went from, they invited us to play the big stage, the headlining stage. We were directly in front of Duran Duran. and then it was the Strokes, and then Kanye. So it couldn't be any bigger for us at the time. And there was for me that sense of, is this what they really like? They want this thing, like this kind of like smashy, screamy punk thing. I didn't anyway. Um, we had some moments in our career of self-awareness in that sense, and realizing that the faster tempo stuff um maybe doesn't translate in the big, because we did play. I mean, on the last tour we did in the first era, we were opening for Nine Inch Nails and Queens of the Stone Age, and so we brought Your Own on Machine into arenas with that tour, um and we saw what worked and what didn't work. I think it worked, I think it worked all the, you know, um, but there was a moment, I think we were touring with the Deftones, and they were so, like, some of their songs are so slow, and still really heavy. And so we explored that on Outrageous Now, songs like Caught Up, which actually does speed up in the middle, but um, where we explored like very, much slower tempo songs, and to see if we can still be heavy in that in that world. And I think it worked for us, Um, but playing the faster songs, right? I kind of want to make a fast record next time.
Yeah, I'd be down, man. Speaking of small rooms, for me personally, one of like the most memorable DFA moments I remember seeing, and I can say it with a lot of my favorite bands, is when you guys played the House of Strombo. I think that is one of
Yeah.
the coolest concepts that George has come up with. Obviously, he's a genius when it comes to that stuff. You
Mhm.
guys, alongside like Against Me, Alexis on Fire, Billy Talent, if I search like DFA live, first thing that will pop up is the House of Strombo for
Oh,
good
cool.
reason. Like you guys killed it on that set. The sound quality is unbelievable. And it's
Cool.
kind of probably a weird feeling for you guys, right? You probably started touring and playing like all these basements with DFA, playing in houses, and then all of a sudden you've kind of reached a point in your career where you've got all these records, you could go anywhere in the world, but is it kind of comforting to come back to like that house environment?
I mean, we don't do that specifically very often.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, there was early in the band, there was a transition that happened. We didn't spend a lot of time in the basements and in the sort of punk rooms and in the churches and all that stuff, community centers, living rooms. Um, there was uh, the first big band that we opened for was Billy Talent, and so that was the first time we really played on a kind of stage. We played bar shows and stuff, obviously, but it was kind of the first time there was like a smoke machine involved and lighting and all these things. And I remember being very adamant, like, no smoke machines, don't put any smoke on stage, no red lights. We had like rules, no green lights. We had these like rules, white lights only. Um, and uh, there was a strange thing that happened where we still had the attitude of being kind of like right there with people, and so we were still very kind of confrontational about playing, and it was still kind of very aggressive. I think that made an impression on people, especially when at the time Billy Talent were kind of, they were like a pop band essentially, and they were really taking off. And they were all ages shows, and people would come to those shows, and the first band they would see ever in their lives was Death from Above, but in a very raw form, like straight from basically the floor to a stage. Um, and we kind of learned a lot in that time, of how to, I think, present, because there's a power dynamic that happens when a band is on stage. There's almost like an authoritative man that you have on an audience, which can be, I think it can get to people. I think they can start to feel like they are up there. Whereas we've almost always tried to make it feel like the whole room is, we're all together in this, not in a sort of hokey kumbaya schmaltzy way, but just in a way that, like, if we're joking around, we're all in on the joke, you know. If you're there to have a good time with us, and we're just like, we're having a, you know, whatever it is, an hour and a half, this is the party right now. And that's why the banter between is always kind of light, and we're trying to have it, we're just trying to have a good time, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where we started with this question.
That's okay. I only have a couple more left. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day for this.
No problem.
You mentioned uh, in an interview with it was called "What's in My Bag," where you went around record shopping and you picked up a bunch of awesome records. But you talked about Jeff Buckley in an interesting
Uh-huh.
sense. You mentioned him as a creature, similar to
Yeah.
Prince, David Bowie. I'm curious to know, like, what that means to you, because is it similar to like when you see an actor and it's like you don't see that actor, you see the character that they're portraying? Is that
Mhm.
a good comparison?
um I think it has more to do with, well, first of all, these people seem, they don't seem, they're so supremely talented that they don't seem human. They seem more connected to, like, the universe in a way that an animal is, you know, like they're so inside their instincts and connected to like God or whatever it is, to like the material of the universe, that they don't seem real. They are real people, you know. They were real people. They had, you know, they had bo. They you know, but there was also something in that era, um, of presentation where you could kind of edit your persona in a way that made you seem beyond human. Um, I think that's probably hard to maintain and hard to pull off in this era. People are definitely overexposed. I watch comedians, and sort of the the main lane for comedians now is podcasting, right? So they're out there and they're just talking for hours and hours and hours every week, and they have their own podcasts and they go on other people's podcasts, and it's just they're constantly exposing themselves, which, whatever, that's fine. I think it's insane how much content there is out there, but I think there's something to be said for limiting your exposure to the world in that way. um
Makes them feel a little bit more mysterious. Like,
well, I mean, not even as a marketing tactic, but just people aren't that interesting. Like, I couldn't imagine if I had the ability to go back and listen to 40 hours of Jeff Buckley talking. Like, you would get to a point where you're like, fucking shut up, dude, you know?
yeah,
But because you're so limited, uh, then you kind of get you get this very curated image of what this person is. That's one aspect of it, but also these are just, uh, they're so connected to whatever it is. You know, this guy's voice was so pure and raw at the same time. It wasn't like a beautiful, perfect tenor operatic voice, right? It was raw. It had the rasp, it had the shriek, it had all of the stuff. And it's obviously he gets that's his father had that, you know, a very similar voice. They're connected to something eternal, right? It's like, obviously it's partially genetic, but what are genes? You know, they're expressions of humanity in this kind of basic biological but also spiritual sense, you know. There's something that drove this guy to keep making that sound with his face. Just because he can do it doesn't mean that he had to go do it, right? It was something that brought him into the world to do that. um yeah, I don't know. It's hard, you know, that you lionize these people and you create sort of gods out of them, and then it becomes kind of impossible uh to actually, to actually learn from, in a sense, because like, well, how can I possibly compete with that, right? But as teachers, these people are wonderful teachers, you know.
You also at the very end you had the Twin Peaks record. I'm a big fan of all things film, TV. So, last
Mhm.
silly question, off the top of your head, Mount Rushmore, TV shows or movies?
Like, what do I put up there in
Like,
in
and your
that world?
four favorite movies or TV shows. I guess maybe
Uh,
that's something that inspired you or you just love watching.
uh, I I could name a bunch. Down by Law, uh, Jim Jarmusch movie, Rumblefish, the Coppola movie. Um, I love the Coen Brothers movies. You know, all of them pretty much. Lebowski is incredible. A Serious Man is incredible. Raising Arizona is incredible. They're all incredible. Um, as far as TV shows, definitely Twin Peaks, Sopranos is eminently rewatchable. Uh, let me try to think of something else that I can just rewatch 1,000 times. I think The Graduate I could keep rewatching. Every now and then throw on Buffalo 66 because it's so rugged. Um, there's I could go on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to Mount Rushmore it.
Fair enough. And my last question, you playing in Edmonton Tuesday, November 12th. You're also in Edmonton for K-Days, so you've seen the city as much as you can over the last couple months. What makes Edmonton a
Mhm.
special city to you? Do you like coming here to play?
I do like going to Edmonton. Yeah. I'm trying to think of specific other shows that we've played there. There's always such a like Alberta's so weird to me. It's such an anomaly in Canada. Like I understand Ontario, obviously Quebec. I'm French Canadian. I understand Vancouver for its its natural beauty and sort of our connection to it through the early days with Ache Records, and I get the East Coast. There's something so mysterious about the middle and the west, sort of this side of the mountains, um, that it feels so protected and feels like its own island, right? Because it's like it takes forever to get to this way, and you got to go over mountains this way. It's almost like a fort. Um, and so when we go there, I feel like I really feel like we're somewhere else,
I love that.
which makes it pretty special.
I love that.
Yeah,
Um, well, hey man, appreciate the time. Did not
yeah,
feel
no
like
problem.
40 minutes, but I really appreciate it, man.